Have you ever been in a situation where you felt completely unseen, like your life didn't carry much weight, yet suddenly you found yourself in a position where every choice mattered? That's exactly what happened to Esther, a young Jewish woman living in Persia. She wasn't from a rich family, and she didn't have power or influence. In fact, Esther was an orphan, raised by her cousin Mordecai, who loved her deeply and guided her with wisdom. One day, King Xerxes of Persia needed a new queen. So a search was made across the kingdom, and young women were brought to the palace. Imagine the fear and uncertainty Esther must have felt. She was just a girl from the community, suddenly surrounded by wealth, royalty, and expectations. Yet by God's favor, she was chosen to be queen. The Bible says in Esther 2:17 that the king was attracted to Esther more than to any of the other women, and she won his favor. She didn't reveal her Jewish identity, just as Mordecai advised, but she held on to her faith quietly. Esther didn't know it yet, but God was positioning her for something far greater than she could imagine. While Esther was queen, trouble began brewing. Haman, one of the king's highest officials, hated Mordecai because he refused to bow down to him. Out of anger and pride, Haman plotted not just against Mordecai, but against all the Jews in the kingdom. He convinced the king to issue a decree that would allow the destruction of every Jewish person on a set day. Imagine the weight of this, an entire people facing extermination because of one man's pride. When Mordecai learned of the plan, he tore his clothes, fasted, and pleaded for Esther to intervene. But here's the tension. No one, not even the queen, could approach the king without being summoned. To do so was risking death unless the king extended his golden scepter. Mordecai's words to Esther still echo today in Esther 4:14. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this? Esther, though afraid, called for all the Jews in the city to fast and pray with her. She said, "I will go to the king, even though it is against the law, and if I perish, I perish." That courage, born out of faith, set the stage for God's deliverance. Esther approached the king, and by God's grace, he welcomed her. She carefully invited the king and Haman to a banquet. There, with wisdom and timing, Esther revealed her true identity and exposed Haman's wicked plan. Shocked and furious, the king ordered that Haman face the very punishment he had planned for the Jews. Mordecai was honored. The Jews were saved, and their enemies were defeated. What began as a tragedy waiting to happen turned into a story of deliverance and hope. The story of Esther reminds us that God places people in specific positions for a reason. Even when we feel small or powerless, he can use us to bring about great change. Esther was just an ordinary woman, yet God worked through her courage and faith to save an entire nation. For you and me, this story is a reminder that our lives are not accidents. When challenges rise and fear whispers, we must remember Esther's example, to stand with faith, to speak with courage, and to trust that God's timing is perfect. Who knows? Perhaps you too are in your position right now for such a time as this. Esther 4:14.